I'm head of product here at Dataswift. I'm just going to start by giving you an overview of Dataswift One product, what we do to try and enhance it, all the things that it currently does. I'll give you a demonstration of our developers dashboard where you would actually go through when you create an app. Many of you would already have seen this, but it's been specially adapted this weekend for the hackathon. But I'll be taking you through a walkthrough of the main parts of it, which you would use for developing a real app and taking it through to getting it approved by our review committee and then on to production. And then I'll give you just one quick case study where one of our developers who's developed a number of apps uses some of our features to use their app for making some quite interesting products. So, quick introduction. Dataswift One. Our infrastructure was designed, I think, as you probably heard from and maybe James and others, as a platform for ensuring that personal data is owned and controlled by the individual. In the past, when you signed up to different websites, you've given personal information away, and that information is held and owned and has to be monitored. Now we have lots of regulations in place, GDPR, etc., to try and give you some of that ownership and control back. But our platform allows you to actually put your personal data in a personal space, which is owned by you, and then you give permission for organizations to access that information. That enables organizations themselves to develop applications where they know that they can get access to data. It's accurate, it depends upon how much data is in there. It could be extremely rich data, but they know that they've got permission to access that data and permission to do whatever they need to do on it. So there's a rigorous ethical framework that has been built that allows that to happen, ensures privacy and compliance for the developer or the enterprise, but obviously it also reduces IT capital and operating costs because the platform is built in the cloud. You, as a developer, don't need to build any infrastructure unless you've got your own back-end architecture that you need to operate any functions that you have. But for some simple applications where there's a website, you don't need anything more than that, other than the use of the APIs to communicate with the individual personal data accounts. So the Dataswift One platform, we have an API which sits above all of our functions that operate in the cloud, and that allows the data supply or data demand applications access to and from your personal data accounts. Dataswift personal data accounts are stored in the Dataswift Vault. So the Vault is where all the individual accounts sit, and our platform talks to and allows permission to get information to and from the individual personal data accounts. Within the platform, we have a number of service APIs that allow the communication to happen as well. But all of those are permissioned. When you go through our, you create your app, you will have to ask for permission to get access to certain things. And when we set your account up, those permissions are actually created at that time. And the platform checks when a request is made that it's allowed to be made. And then the data can move between the PDA and wherever else it's meant to go to. So the platform has been developed over a number of years. As a product, we're always looking for improvements, suggestions for changes, and we have a number of developers who, throughout the time that they've been developing with us, have made suggestions for improvements and changes, which we'll always consider and look at, but we'll always look at those and consider those in line with the ethical restrictions that we have to ensure personal data security. So we're always open for suggestions, but we obviously have to bear in mind our framework of making sure that personal data is secure and controlled by the individual. So looking at the individual product features, we have our personal data accounts, which is the core fundamental building block of personal data storage in Dataswift. We have a enterprise version, multi-tenanted. You may hear that referred to by Dataswift people as contracted PDAs. That is a mechanism where an enterprise can control, have joint access control of the personal data account. So that might be used in a scenario where you have an HR department, for example, who's holding employee records, and they need to update those records without the owner of the PDA's consent. So before that happens, you set up a contract between the individual and the enterprise that allows that to happen. We also have an open API that allows you to import data from almost any source that has an open API, and it will write it into a read-only namespace within your PDA. So an example of that could be Facebook data, for example, where you would go and pull your Facebook posts, store them in a namespace in your PDA, and then other applications can then just read that data. It's important that that namespace becomes read-only because its original source of truth is actually in Facebook. So you can't change any of that data in that namespace. We also have private serverless functions where you can do computations on data that comes into the PDA and then have them stored back in. I'll talk about that in more detail later. And a file storage system, because the PDA is essentially a database, so you can't store files in them. So looking at the personal data accounts, as I said earlier, created in Dataswift vaults, they allow individuals to collect and store, and in the case of serverless functions, you can process the data, and then you give permission for an application or multiple applications to get access to that data, but you're the person that's in control. They obviously give you full ownership and you have legal rights to the data within there, and it enables the individuals to contract with, initially, as we've started off, a single party, but as the company grows, you may have data within your PDA, and examples of what we're doing and some of the teams are doing within the hackathon this weekend. You would want to be able to pull that data from multiple places. So you could have multiple organizations who want to get to the same data within a namespace. If you give their permissions for that, then over time, you'll be able to then say, well, I've got this data in my PDA, I can allow company A, company B, and company Z to have access to that. Personal data accounts are powered by HAT microserver. So again, I'm using some terms that you may or may not have heard. HAT microserver is something that was developed over a number of years, and it's a technology to allow a cloud-based personal database. So Dataswift services are built and powered by that technology, and we build our range of services on top of that. Enterprise multi-tenant database. So as I said, this is something that you may hear called contracted PDAs. The reason for this is you can store data in there, and you can give permission for an enterprise. And the example I used earlier was an enterprise that might have your employee records. So it's the same as a standard PDA, except in a standard PDA, when you're using it, you would be either using a web front end or an app. And when changes are made, because you're using that app, you're giving permission for those changes to be made. With a multi-tenant database, you as an individual give permission for the enterprise to also update that. So you may not be online when something's being changed. So it could be a pay rise, it could be information about your current salary that goes in there. those things can be put into the namespace, but only that namespace within your PDA. You could have other namespaces within your PDA that don't have that multi-tenant access, but you give them joint access rights to put information and update it. So because of that, you as the PDA owner just cannot cancel that. There is some contractual obligation between both you and the organization. So you both have to agree that that contract can be cancelled. You can't also, just go ahead and delete it, but you can't. They can't then start to do things without asking for additional permission from you. So they couldn't just start writing data in there that you haven't permitted. You need to know what's going to be going in from at day one. But the whole point of the multi-tenant database is that you can give access to one particular namespace and still retain control on and privacy of any other namespaces within your PDA. The Open Data Import API, again within the enterprise, within Dataswift, you might hear those referred to as data plugs. They are essentially, it's just a very lightweight API that allows our services to request information from another web service. So the example I gave was Facebook. We currently have a number of data plugs that are already in operation that pulls information from Spotify, Facebook, Twitter, for example. So you can then ask for your personal information from those third-party services. The API sets up the brokering of asking for that user's information from the third party, and then once it's retrieved, taking that information, getting the data, and writing it into a read-only namespace within that user's namespace. So you could have a number of these for lots of different services that you may pull. On my own PDA, I have my Spotify data pulled in, I have my Facebook data pulled in, and my Twitter data pulled in. So I can log into my personal data account and see a timeline of all those different feeds amalgamated. For an individual company, if you've authorized them to read that data, they can then pull data from those feeds and do other things with them. And one example I'll give you a bit later is of one of our developers who uses Facebook data in a number of innovative ways for giving alternative loan scores and for a kind of a sentiment tracker to see how you would look for an insurance company. Private serverless computations are just what they say. If you've got data in a PDA, we can then allow you to pass that data to a serverless machine that will do some computations on it for you. That data can then be put back into your PDA. So as an example, you could take some data you put in about your how you're feeling today, whether you've got any symptoms, and then a COVID risk score could be computed against an algorithm that sits on the server. The data can be pulled out, the analysis can be run, and the data can be then returned back to your PDA. That data can then be anonymized, and that data could then either be pulled to multiple sources. Again, talking about some of the things that the projects are going on in the hackathon, that could be, for example, energy data. So your thermostat settings, your house, the type of house that you live in could all be pulled in, but then you can then go and run computations on that and return a score, some type of, if you like, kilowatt hour for that type of property. And then you can then anonymize that, so it doesn't know where it comes from, and that data can be provided to lots of third parties to do their own analysis on it. So the serverless computation functions allow data in a PDA to be taken out, manipulated, and then put back in for further use. The file storage system is a mechanism for storing files that are associated with your PDA. So a PDA is essentially a database, so you cannot store flat files into a database unless they're rendered into some type of text base. So we will allow these to be stored in an S3 storage system managed by Dataswift, but those files are then directly linked to the namespace for each individual PDA, so that they are the only people who can access the file, or again, if it's in the multi-tenant scenario, the other entity and enterprise that's associated with it. Obviously, there is all security encrypted so that they're not visible in when they're at rest. So it's potential use cases. These are sort of looking at what's been going on over this current weekend. We try to think of some ways in the way that the PDA could be used. Some of these may have already been discussed, certainly over the weekend and in the individual Slack channels. And I think James may have given you an overview on some of these yesterday. But personal device data analytics. You can import multiple data sets from, again, as an example, smart thermostat, smart meters, and so they could be multiple data sources from your own property. Then using private compute functions, you could process that raw data into insights and data sets that could be used for other purposes. So you can get personal device analytics. At the moment, these are all things that we don't actually have any particular developers using, but they're the sorts of things that we know are possible and we think that people can get benefit from, and that's part of why the hackathon this weekend is an ideal platform for developing these use cases to see how best they can be developed. The outcome from a lot of the work that's going to be done this weekend in the product team, we'll be looking at to see what necessary things may be required for the platform, other developments that we may need to try and build up and take things further. Another use case, as we saw, when we've got that PDA data, we can have it stored, anonymized, using the contracted PDA, multi-tenant PDA. An organization could collate information from multiple users and then give them back settings for optimized energy use. So you're not just collecting information from your home, they're collecting it from multiple homes, analyzing that data, looking at the similar sorts of houses, trying to find the house that has the best energy consumption, looking at what those settings that they've got in their houses for thermostat settings, when things are turned on and off, etc. And then they could provide that as suggestions to all the houses that they manage, or if they're the energy supplier for them, to then say to them, back in an app, we suggest that you turn your thermostat down by 1 degree at this time or those times, and you might see minimal distances. But it's trying to find ways of giving a wide range of consumers settings that would make them actually consume less energy and be more green in their daily patterns. Another potential opportunity is energy trading exchanges. So you could have an example where you've got that information. There are people who are using less energy. There are people who are using more energy. And some people may want to use more energy. And so there could be a trade-off between those who use less and more. But how do you make sure that you are actually, once you've traded, you don't go back up and start using lots of money, lots of energy rather, and whatever the payback is for using that is. So the energy is then going to go back into the PDA. It's then obviously a source of truth for that data, so it can be tracked and monitored. And those energy patterns for that particular property could be retained for years. So as you go between property to property, your energy use, how you use it, different suppliers can all be taken with you. The benefit of having your own personal data account is that anything that's in it could be moved with you as you go about your daily life. And over many years, the information that's in it can be sort of improved upon and become a much richer data set. So at this point, I'm just going to give you a quick demonstration of our developers dashboard. So I'll need to switch now to the screen here, if I can get rid of. Hopefully you can still all see that. So this is the Dataswift developers dashboard. Here is where you would go to create the applications and go through the settings that are needed for you to get that from the start of a project through to our approval process. If you've been working on some projects in the hackathon today, you'll probably already seen this, and we've got the hack from home button down here, which allows you to go and create a device. But here I've got an application which I've got prepared, which is the steps you would go through to get an app from the initial conception all the way through to getting it ready for review to get onto our production platform. So this screen here shows you that where you would put the basic information in. So your application name, your website, any support details, and there'll be a namespace and an application ID given to it. That information will be submitted when you first create the app. If I go back to my overview screen, we do a quick start here. You see, this is where it asks for that basic information, and that's all you need to actually get started to develop a project. But once you want to go through to production, you'll need to finish off going through the rest of the settings. Quickly go back into here again. So that's those data here. As you go through each stage, you'll notice the bars on the left turn green to let you know that you've completed everything. So this is the other part of our quick start, choosing the platforms that you're going to develop on. Very important, these parts here, privacy and terms of use. This is where you would put links to your privacy policy and your terms of use. Dataswift will check these when you go through to production. It's for us to ensure that you have a privacy policy that matches what you say your app does, and likewise, terms of use. These are very important, so obviously to ensure that there is a good data privacy for the data that's going into the PDA. The application's rating, this is where your app is given a rating based on what it can actually do. And as you go through each section here, it shows you what you do with the data and how you treat it. Depends on what rating you actually end up with your data. And you'll see as you go through different options based on what your data does, your rating will either go up or down. Description and previews. So you would then put in any descriptions and previews about your app in an application, your app logo. But the most important one is the data attributes. This is currently held in a spreadsheet, but as we develop the platform moving forward, we'll be putting this information actually within the portal itself. And this is where you would actually put in what you do with the data at every stage of its collection and storage, so that we can then be sure that, again, the data that's being stored in the PDA is actually being stored in a way that it aligns with your security, your privacy and terms and conditions. Just quickly looking at the time, so running out, so I'll quickly skip on to one quick case study, and that's of one of our developers who uses third-party data from Facebook to provide a solution for RSA insurance. So this company here, it's a smart data study they're doing at the moment. So they're trying to get insurance more affordable to young drivers. So they're doing a study to understand that. And to do that, they're getting data from your Facebook posts. What they do is, I'll quickly skip through this. They allow you to sign up for a personal data account. So all that data is written into a specific namespace just for Facebook data on your namespace. And they'll, at the end of it, they'll do some analysis. I can't go all the way through this because this is in our sandbox environment, so it's not actually approved by Facebook yet, but you'll see the basis of what happens. So as I continue here, it will redirect this to Dataswift. You see there's an email put in, which will sign up for a postal data account. I'll skip through. This is what we call our HMI screen, and this is what tells you the permissions of what this application is trying to do. So here you see it's got read and write access. What it's going to be doing, it's going to do with an alternative score based on your social data. The duration of access, it will have it until it's disabled. If this was a multi-tenanted one, that description would be slightly different. And the data connection, it's telling you here, it will also connect to a Facebook account to get some data. Once you click agree, your PDA is created by Dataswift. And at the end of that process, you're being redirected back to the app where you can then go on to the next step. And as you see here, it will ask you if you want to continue with Facebook. As I mentioned, I can't click here because this is in a development environment. And as you'll see, Facebook will tell me that I'm not actually allowed to go and do it at this point, but it will try and redirect and take you off to Facebook. So as you can see, I've gone into Facebook. So hopefully that's given you a pretty good overview of Dataswift and product and some examples of how it can be used. At this point, I think we should hand back to James, or I'm not sure if it's Teresa, because I can see that time is almost up.
Yes, perfect timing. Thanks so much, Steve. This was really good. Shall we do some questions as well?
Sure.
Nothing coming in yet, which is a good sign.
That means everybody understood everything.
Yeah, I think it might also be a lot to take in.
Yeah, I mean, the big takeaway is it's a very flexible platform. There are lots of things you can do with it. There are lots of things that we potentially want to do for enhancements on the product as we move forward. I think this hackathon weekend will probably generate a number of different things for ideas for us to improve, make additions, make changes to the platform itself. But trying to get your head around all the things that it currently does, because some of those are not things that are involved, particularly the multi-tenant access. Nobody's getting involved in doing anything with that in the hackathon, but it would just give you a taster of the sort of things that the platform can do.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. We'll have that recording forever now. We'll put that up to watch that again.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Great.